Hi. Today we're going to talk about JavaScript objects, and in particular we're going to talk about that'll be JSON objects. The learning objectives for today is the student has acquired the skills needed to select and apply key principles, technologies and methods to the programming of complex digital user interfaces. So what we're doing today is part of solving that learning objective. There's not anything you should have read for today. A JSON object. Well, we've seen them before. JSON is short for JavaScript object notation. And when you use JavaScript object notation or JSON, the JSON format in JavaScript, you are actually creating an object within JavaScript. An object holds key value pairs, and these values can be text, numbers, booleans, or functions. And we'll do a bit of each today. Go to Canvas and download the zip file from today's lecture, JavaScript objects, and this. Unpack it somewhere, you'll want to keep it later. And open index.html with a browser, open Visual Studio Code, and open the unzipped folder in Visual Studio Code. Remember to open the entire folder. Open index.html and script.js in the editor. Do that now. Okay, as you can see, we've got the index.html file and we've got the JavaScript file here, and it's in my standard structure. There's nothing really complicated about this. I've got a few fav icons that I put in usually now. Viewport, normalize CSS, and my own CSS framework called Frappe, and a style sheet and a JavaScript file with the fore on it. And that's basically it. And in our body section we've got a main tag and we've got an article tag, and there's a headline and an output div. So there's a div with the ID output, and that's it. And that looks something like this. So this is our output with the headline. There's nothing in console. We haven't done any JavaScript yet. We can do a console log, test this, and see that our JavaScript runs. Yes, we're good. So first of all, let's try to create an object. And I just need to get my things in order here to sit properly. So let's do a job. Let job be equal to, and I use curly brackets since that's what encapsulates an object in the JSON format. And we can say job title. So title. That's the key, and how to set a value is we set a colon, and then we add quotation marks, either single or double, doesn't matter, but you need to add the same kind at the end and at the beginning. I usually use single quotation marks. We can say the job title here is Scara, and the description is I set a comma here because I need to set a second key value pair, and to differ between key value pairs we use commas, so they are separated by comma. Description, I'm setting that to be equal to scare children to extract energy. Energy. Yes, all right. And then I am setting another key called isActive, and the value of that is true. We can set a salary, set that to, oh sorry, that shouldn't have been a semicolon, that should be a comma again. Salary, I'll put something random in here, 10,000. All right, good. So we've got these 3 different kinds of key value pairs here. We've got a key here which has text as value. We've got a key here which has text as value. We've got a key who has a boolean as value, and we've got a key who has a number as value. Alright, and if we try to console log job here, we should be able to see the object in JavaScript. Make sure you save and then reload the page over here. Now you can see we've got this object here. I can click on the small triangle and fold it out, extend it. And you can see we've got title scarer, description, scare children to extract energy, is active true, salary 10,000. And then there's some stuff about what kind of item it is in the HTML DOM, and it's a prototype object, so that's fine. So we've created an object here. Okay, pause the video now and input this JavaScript and make sure that you get the output in console. Okay, so what if we want to output stuff in the HTML instead of outputting it in console? Let's see what happens if we output the object itself in HTML. And we've got this div with the ID output, so let's output it to this, or this div, right? Yeah. So I'm gonna be using that output element a lot of times, so I'll create a variable that consists of that element. So let's output elm be equal to document.query select or, and we're finding it based on CSS, so we're finding it by the ID of output, so hashtag output. That is our div here, so we can do stuff with that div now. So if we want to output the object to output to this div, we can find it by saying output element inner HTML, set that to be equal to job. This means that now we should have our object output in HTML. Let's see what happens. Okay, so we've got this this text instead of the object itself, which is basically just information of there being an object of the type object. So that's not quite what we're looking for. So what can we do instead? Well, the thing is that it's not just going to output the entire object into HTML. What we can do is we can output values from it instead. So let's see what happens if we find one of the values, job.title for instance. What happens if I do that? Reload. Oh, we've got scarer, and we can see we've got job title scarer. So maybe if we do another one with description, job description, let's see what happens then. We've got scare children to extract energy. Okay, and I've set the inner HTML to be equal to. If we say plus equal, it will not replace, it will add to it. Let's see. So scare children to extract energy. All right. And this of course looks like I don't know what crap, because it just outputs it in a straight line here. We can, yeah, I don't care. Yes, it's fine. Let's try outputting our Boolean and the number as well. So is active, and oh, that was my mistake, and salary. Let's see what happens. So we've got scarer, we've got scare children in to extract energy, we've got true, there we go, and we've got 10,000. So we can output each of these if we want to. If you want to make it look a bit more pretty, we can add stuff like this. Break for each of them. Okay. So type this in. Pause the video and type this in, and make sure you got the output in on the HTML. Okay. So when we look at the console, we can see that we've got the object here, which is a handy way of figuring out what's inside of the object if we haven't written it ourselves. So we can actually navigate and traverse through the object by outputting it to console, which is pretty neat. And then we can, of course, like we just did with the entire object in console, we can say console log. We can output the different values, like job title, for instance. And if we do that, we can see scarer is output to console. So job.title would be the value of the object's job title key, right? And we can do the same for the others. Description is active, salary. Let's see. Yeah, we've got scarer, scare children to extract energy, true. And you can see this got another color. That's because it's another. It's not a string. It's a Boolean, and this got another color. It's a number. All right. Okay. Try typing these in and see if it works for you. By the way, my trick of copying a line on PC is holding down Alt Shift and just pressing the down arrow. Okay. Type this text in. Pause the video and type the text in. See if it works. Okay, if it works, let's go ahead. Let's clean all of this up. I'm gonna delete all of this. Or am I? No. I am gonna delete this stack here. Good. And then I want to add something to our object here, the job object. I want to show you how you can add a function to it. So let's use the status of is active. And have it output different texts, whether it's active or not. So let's see what happens here. So I want to create a new key called show details. And that key is a function. So we'll add the parentheses, and after that the curly brackets. And inside of the curly brackets, I'm creating a new variable called status that I am setting to be equal to this dot is active, and this in this case refers to our object. So if you use this inside of an object, it always refers to the object that it is inside. So this is in effect the job object. So instead of writing job.isActive, I can write this.isActive. This is handy in a lot of different places. For now, we'll just use it. I am using an shorthand for an if sentence here. I am basically saying if this is active, if that is true, then I want to add one value to status. If it's not true, I want to add another value to status. So what I'm doing here is I am writing it like this. And what this means is the status variable is created here. I'm initializing it. And I'm saying if this sentence is true, which means if isActive is true, then put the value ongoing inside of status. If it's not true, then put the value on pause into status. So this is in effect an if sentence. I could write it out like this. Let status 2 be equal to nothing, and then I could say if is active, sorry, this is active, this dot is active, then I would say status 2 is equal to ongoing, and I will write an else. Status 2 is equal to on pause. So all of this, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code are replaced by this line of code. They are doing the exact same thing. So this is a shorthand version of an if sentence with a variable initialization in the same instance. Okay, but I'll use it like the shorthand is here. So show details. I've now got this variable called status, which is either ongoing or on pause, right? And then I want to console log some text depending on, well, I just want to console log some text. So let's do that. Console log the position as, and then I want to add the job title. Job, maybe I should use this dot title. I'm wondering what will happen if I use this here. Let's see. Means you, and then I want to add the job description. This description. I will remove this because we don't want to see this anyway. It is currently, and then I want to write the status. And I'm doing something stupid here. I should use the accent graphs, so let's do that. Status. And in this case it is, yeah, status is not from the job object, it's a local variable. I have just created it, so I can just write status. And I need to replace these with accent graphs. There we go. Alright, so we've got a console log with the position is the position as title, means you, whatever you do with this description, it is currently, and then the value of status, either ongoing or on pause. Okay, let's see what happens if it blows up. Well, nothing happens. And you could say why? Well, basically we have just created a function, we haven't called it, so we need to call the function for it to do something. And to call this function called showDetails, which resides inside of the job object, I need to write job.showDetails. Alright, let's see what happens if I do this. We've got the position as scarer means you scare children to extract energy. It is currently ongoing. Okay, let me try to change the value of as active to false instead. Let's see what happens then. And it says it is currently on pause. Alright, it works. I want to add a full stop here. Okay, so yes, we're good there. And we could do stuff like writing the monthly salary is, and let's say salary divided by 12. Let's see what happens. Salary is not defined. No, it is not. It is this.salary, because it's not just a variable that exists outside of itself here. Is 833.3333, etc. We can never mind that. So try writing this. Just pause the video and type this in and see that you got something like this in the console. Try messing around with the values and see what happens. Okay, so what if we want to create a second job? Let's create an assistant job for this. One way we can do this is either start over again, or we can copy the prototype of this job, which means that we can create a new object based on the job object, and we can say let assistant there we go, be equal to object. There's a method for this called Object.create, and we just input the object that we want to copy the form of as a parameter. And let's see what happens if we use assistant dot show details, as we did with job show details. We get the same thing outputted twice here. So if I comment this out, job show details, we have the assistant here. So we've basically got an object with the same values as we had before. So let's start changing those values. And I'll change them before we have assistant show details. So let's change the title. Assistant.title. We can set that to be equal to scarer assistant. And we can change the description to be equal to help the scarers scare children. And we can set is active. We can set that to, I don't know, false, true, true. I'll set it to true. And please note that I'm not writing this in the JSON format. I'm just changing the single values. So I'm using equal to, not the colon, right? That was is active. Yeah, sure. Let's set a salary as well. As assistant.salary, set that to be equal to, he's not gonna be happy, Mike Wazowski, but let's do it anyway. 6,000 monster credits, I don't know. Okay, so let's see what happens when we've changed these values. Let's reload. So the position as Scare assistant means you help the scarers scare children. It is currently ongoing. The monthly salary is 500. Sorry. So we've got we've got a copy of the object, and we can change the values, and it's still got all of the same functionality as the original object. So we can still use show details, for instance. If we don't change anything here, let's comment this line out, then let's see what happens. Okay, it uses the same method of calculation, or the old value from the original object. Okay, type this in. Pause the video and type this in, and I'll see you right after. Make sure you got the output in the console, as it should be. Okay, so we've got our job object and we've got our assistant object, and let's see. We can output our keys, the keys that are within the object, to see which keys are available to us, and let's try that out first. If we say let the keys be equal to Object.keys, and we want the keys of the assistant object, it wouldn't matter because they are actually the same, both job and assistant. But if right here I've created a variable called keys, and I'm using the object method with the method keys, and I'm using assistant as the parameter for that, so it should extract the keys that exist within assistant right now. And if we console log those, I'll remove the show details, so we only got this console log. Let's see what happens. We've got an array with title, description is active, and salary. So we can see it is an array and it's got those 4 items, so that's fine. We can extend the object with the new keys. So let's actually try that. Let's test that out. So we've got the keys here now. So let's do this. We can say assistant dot we'll create a new key called test. We'll set that to be equal to something. And let's see what happens if we console log assistant test. It logs something, which is the value we added to it. Fine. So let's see if we have actually added a new key to the object. We can do this by outputting using the Object.keys method again. So let's try that. We'll just change the value of keys to be equal to Object.keys assistant again. And then we will console log that one more time. I'll copy this and move it. There I go. Let's see what happens. Alright, so we can see first of all we've got an array with 4 keys. Then we add the key test, and then we've got an array with 5 keys. So it's depending on what the object looks like at the moment where you ask. Okay, try pausing and typing this in and make sure that it works, and you should have something that looks like this in console when you're done. Okay, so we can iterate through these keys now that we've got them. We can do a for loop with them, but we'll do it slightly different today compared to what you've learned earlier. And what we can do is we can again look at the object keys for assistant, and instead of using a for loop, we use a method called forEach, which loops through every single item in the array that is created by using Object.keys assistant. And I am using key here as a variable name for the individual key that we're using. This can actually be whatever you want. I'm using key because that makes sense to me. And I'm using the arrow method, which is new to JavaScript ES6. So I'm saying for each of the items within the array that is created by using Object.keys assistant, I am using a method on each of those. And that method basically extracts the value from the key, the current key, and then locks the key name with the key's value. So let's try that out. So we're extracting the value from the current key in our loop here, and we're saying, well, that the value is equal to assistant square brackets key. So the object assistant and the key that is equal to, which name is equal to the name that we extract in our forEach loop here. Okay, where am I in my code? There I am. So we've got the value in the value variable. Then I want to console log, and I'm using accent graphs, and I'll output the key. Semicolon, and then write the value of it. So $, curly brackets, value. Alright. So this should output a list of the key value pairs that are in the array, or sorry, in the object at this time. Good. We've got title, description is active, salary, test something. Great. So this works. If you want to see how many keys are in the object at any given time, you can use length to test it. So let's do that, and then after that you can pause and type all of this in. But let's test the length. Object.keys assistant.length, right? This would basically just this is just a number value. So let's add that to a variable. So we say let length be equal to Object.keys of the assistant object, and .length means how many keys are there. So we can console log this value by saying console log length. Let's see what happens in our output here. 5, which is the same as the amount in the array, which is good. That's kind of the purpose. So we can measure the length or the amount, the number of keys inside of the object this way. Okay, try that out and pause the video now, type this in, make sure you got something that looks like this in your console, and then we'll get on afterwards. Let's look at a way of getting the values only from the objects instead of getting the keys. We can do it in much the same way as we did with keys. We can use I'll create a new variable called values, and we can set that to be equal to object, and instead of writing keys we can use values and write the object name in here as a parameter. And if we console log this, we get an array of values. As you can see here, Scare Assistant help the scarer scare children, true 600. Try this out, see if it works for you. Just pause the video and do that. We can also get the key value pairs of the object by looking, get those into an array by using entries. So let's try that. I'll comment out this console log. Let's create a new variable called entries. Let entries be equal to our object method. Sorry, we need to get that with a capital O. Object dot entries. There we go. And we are still looking at the assistant object. Let's console log this and see what happens. So now we've actually got an array of arrays, right? As you can see, we've got an array with the first bit, title, where the first element in the array is title, the second element is Scare Assistant. So we've got an array with arrays inside of them. And the way we can pull information from this is that we can just access the first and the second entry in each of these arrays. So let's try that. Say entries for each. Entries dot for each, please. No, don't do this for me. For each, thank you. And I want to use entry and use the arrow function again. And I want the key. I'll create a variable called key, and I'll say, well, entry at position 0, index 0, that should be the key. And value, that'll be entry at position 1, so the second position. Sorry, index 1, the second position. And if we console log this bunch here, I'll use accent graphs again, and I want to console log key, colon, $, curly brackets, value. Then our for each should loop through all of the items that are in the entries array, right? And each of these items in the entry array is an item. Is an array. So we'll grab the first and second item in the array that we are at, and output that in the console. So we should have needs key value pairs displayed in the console now. And we've got that too. So we've got title, scanner assistant, description is active too, etc. So that is another way that we can access this information. Okay, type this in and see if it works for you. Just pause the video now. Great. We can combine objects as well. We can do this by using an assign method that rests within the object methods for JavaScript. First of all, let's try creating some new a new object here. I'll just comment all of the above out, including actually assistant, just to make sure none of it messes with my code down here. So I should have a blank console. Yes, I've got that. So let's try this out, combining objects into a new object by using the assign method. Let's create an object called name, and that object consists of first name, and last name, and you can write whatever names you want. Okay, let's create another object called details. Set that to be equal to something here. Again, curly brackets as always with objects. Let's write a job key. There we go. And the C was employer, Black Mesa. Good. So now we've got two different objects here. We've got name and details. So let's try outputting those. Output name and details as well. So let's see if that works. We should have two objects on two different lines in the console now. Okay, so we've got one object with first name and last name, and another object with job and employer. Type this in and make sure that you've got the same output in console. Okay, so let's try combining these two objects into one object. Let's create a new variable called protagonist, and this variable's value will be the combined objects of name and details. So let's say object, again a method that is being used to handle objects in JavaScript, and that method is called assign. And what we do with it is we add the two objects that we want to combine, two or more objects, and we do this by just separating them by a comma. So name, comma, details. And let's try console logging this new object. See what happens. Okay, so now we've got the first of all we're console logging the name object and the details object, and then we're console logging the protagonist object, which consists of all of the information that was in the two objects before. So we can combine these objects as one big one. Okay. Pause the video, type this in, and make sure that you got the same result. Alright, so let's go ahead and try something else. We'll create a function inside of an object and use this keyword in JavaScript as instead of the variable name of the object, again, like we did before. So let's try that out first. We'll say let new protagonist set that to be equal to first name and last name. And then we'll create a function that will make a combined value of first name and last name. We'll call that function full name. And what we do is basically we create a key for it, and then we set a value for it, which is the anonymous function in this case, called function. And because the function is residing inside of an object, it's actually called a method. The naming of functions and methods in JavaScript is a bit icky, but never mind, as long as you use the function keyword for it, then you're good. Alright, we'll have full name. We'll have that return the first name plus the last name with a space in between. So let's just use accent graphs, $, first name, space, $, curly brackets, last name. So as you can see, we've got this dot in front of it, which means that in this case, as I told you before about this, when using it inside of an object, it always refers to the object itself. So if you use this inside of an object when you do anything, then it's the object that we're dealing with. So this is the same as writing new protagonist in this case. So what happens now if we output new protagonist full name? Let's try that out. Console log new protagonist dot full name. Ik fill full. Let's see what happens. Right now I have forgotten something. I have forgotten to enter the parentheses here. Let's see what happens when I do that. Something's wrong, right? So I'm calling, oh, it's actually, I completely broke it. Let's see it again. Yeah, it's doing something, even though I've not put on the parentheses for the function call here. It's actually returning the function itself here. It's telling us what is inside of the function. So there's a trick there. You should be careful about. But you can get the value of inside of the function itself, by not adding the parentheses when you do this. But if you add the parentheses, we should just get the name. We should get the actual first name space last name. There we go. So Alex space Vance is the value from here. And that is because we are calling the function that resides within our object. So we're calling new protagonist, full name, and the value of that key value pair is an actual function, all right, which returns something. And when it returns something, that means that it will replace that will be the value that will replace this function call, right? Okay, type this in, try it out, see if it works for you. Okay, I have commented out all of my code basically. And let's go on to the next thing. We can freeze objects so that you cannot change the values or add new keys to it. You can do this by using the freeze and the seal methods within the object. So let's test it out and see what happens. We'll create a new variable with an antagonist. And the variable is an object, and the name key, the value for that is GLaDOS, and the weapon of this antagonist is sarcasm, one of the best weapons. Alright, so now we've got a antagonist object and an object named antagonist with name and weapon key value pairs. If we can freeze this object so that we can't so there are some things that we can't do to it. So let's try that out. We'll say that the object, the variable, the object is the same as, is equal to, and here we use the object method dot freeze dot not comma dot freeze and then the object again. This means that we have now replaced the object with an object that is frozen, right? With a copy of itself that is frozen. And what happens if we try to change stuff in it? Well, let's test it out. Antagonist dot name. We will try changing the name to Wheatley, and we will try to change the weapon to stupidity. That's an awful word to misspell. And we'll try something else. We will try to add a new key to it and see what happens. Purpose, set that to be equal to stopping GLaDOS from being too smart. Yes. So let's try to console log this antagonist object now and see what's in there and what can we change and what can we add. There we go. Okay, so we can see that we have we haven't changed a thing, basically. So that's a good thing because we froze the object. Let's see what happens if we comment that line out where we freeze the object. What happens then? Well, then we can change anything and we can add the key. So apparently the freeze is working as intended. Type this in and check that it works in your console. Remember to try to freeze and not freeze it by activating and deactivating this line. There is a way of checking if an object has been frozen before you try to do any changing on it. Basically there is an isFrozen method that you can use on it. So let's try to check that. We can do it down here. We'll just create a new variable. That's a boolean. So we'll create an object isFrozen. And we will set that to be equal to object dot, this is going very well, uppercase object dot is frozen, and then we add the object that we want to test in the parameter. So the value of object is frozen is either true or false depending on the result of this, right? And we can try to console log what happens. Let's see. It says false here. So let me try to comment in the line where uncomment the line where it says Object.freeze, so that it's frozen now. Let's load. Yeah, and now it says true. So we've got a successful test to see if it's frozen or not. Then you could of course do something like, well, if it's not frozen, then change my names or whatever. So you can go like this. Let's move this down here. Let's say if not object is frozen, then change this stuff. So now we test if it's frozen. If it's not frozen, not, the exclamation mark means not, so that's the opposite Boolean value. If it's not frozen, well, then try to change these things, and we can move this down here and see what happens. So let's try this out. Right now it's frozen, so it should just be GLaDOS and sarcasm. Let's see, GLaDOS and sarcasm. Let's not freeze it. Reload again. Now it's Wheatley, stupidity, stopping GLaDOS from being too smart. So we can do a test so that we don't actually try changing an object that is frozen. Alright, try typing this in. Pause the video, type this in, and mess around with the freeze or not line here. Uncomment that and see what happens. Alright, so yeah, we can also use a method called seal, which doesn't prevent changing the values but prevents adding new keys. So let's try that out. I will comment out all of this again. There we go. So now we should have a clean console. Yes, we've got that. Okay, so I'll create a new object called user. I set that to be equal to name, in this case narrator, and the narrator's got a password, which is I can't sleep. Doesn't matter, you can put anything in there. And well, he's got a job, so position, which is inspect car accidents to determine if an automobile model should be recalled. You can put in whatever you want. Alright, so now we've got this object user with some key value pairs. Let's just test if that works. Console log user. Good. Yeah, we've got these key value pairs. That's fine. So let's try sealing that object. We can do this by saying, well, user, the user object is the same as the user object where it's sealed. So now we're overwriting the object with itself, but in a sealed version. So user is now equal to itself, but in a sealed version, which means that it is in itself being sealed, right? So let's try changing some values and see if we can add some keys. So if we say user.name, set that to be equal to Tyler, and we can set user password to be equal to don't talk about it, and we can set user dot position to be equal to the gorilla terrorist of the food service industry. Alright, so we've changed a couple of things here, and let's try to add a new key as well, see what happens. User alternate personality is equal to narrator, and let's console log this. Console.log user again here. Okay. Let's see what happens. So we've got the first object that we log, which is our first incident of user before we change it. We've got yeah, and that's actually quite funny, because when I try to see the details of this, it probably looks up the object again, and then it figures out to use the information from down here instead. But you can see it's narrator, password I can sleep, and position inspects car accidents to determine if an automobile model should be recalled. And down here you can see the object has the name Tyler, the password don't talk about it, position the guerrilla terrorist of the food service industry. But there's not been added an alternate personality key, so that has been stopped by using the seal method. Okay, so that kind of rounds up this part of it. I want to look at these are objects that we have created ourselves. There are objects that are created automatically as well. But first, let's type this in and see if it works for you. Make sure that you've got results that look sort of like this. And when you've got that, let's go ahead. So pause the video now and do that. Okay, let's have a look at a couple of objects that are created automatically instead of objects that we create ourselves. One of them is a window, so let's look at that. If we console log window, that is an object that has been created by JavaScript itself, by the browser itself. So we can see that that has got a lot of information on it, right? But it exists whenever there is a tab that's open or a window that's open. That will exist. We can do stuff like let's find a couple of these properties, inner height, for instance, and inner width. Let's see what happens if we look at these. 801. Let's swap these around. It bugs me that it's in the wrong order. 281 width and 801 height. Let's do this and reload. Now it's 751 width, 801 height. So you can actually measure the window, and if you measure it each time you resize, use the onResize event trigger, then you can have a like a constant, not a constant value, but a updated value of the window size. But each time you do this, you use window inner width or window inner height, you will actually get the current width or height of the viewport. There's also stuff like the document object. So let's have a quick look at that. And as you can see here, that is basically what we usually do when we navigate around in it. We use document query select, and it is the actual content of the HTML as it is in memory on the browser. But if you look at the window here, the window object, you can see there's a lot of stuff that you can look up. I've used inner width and inner height, but you can do all sorts of stuff with it. And yeah, there's a lot of properties that you can look up. Some that you can change, but most of them you can look up. So, well, I suggest that you play around with it and see what you can use it for, and yeah, get to know it in that way. But these are a couple of objects that have been created for you by the browser. So that's sort of the difference. If you use this in JavaScript and you don't have it inside of an object or inside of a function or something like that, then it behaves slightly different than what it did before when we had it inside of the object. Let's see what it says here. Console log this. In this case, it usually refers to the top level object, which is always the window. So you can see if I use this, it is the same as this one up here. So let me just comment this out, and this. Now I've got console log window, and I've got console log this, and you can see it's the same thing. If I swap them around, if I have this before window, it's the same thing, because this is relative to where it is placed in the code. And if it's in the root level as it is now, then this is referring to the window object. But if you use this inside of an object, it will be the object that this is referring to. If you put an onClick event on an element and write this inside of that element, this will refer to the element itself that has been clicked on. So this is very elusive in its way of taking on attributes, but it's something you would want to play around with and see what happens with when you get to a later stage. But be careful with this, because it changes value depending on where it is. Okay. And that's it for now. So test this out and see what happens, and we can talk about it during the lesson. Okay. Have fun and take care of yourselves, and I'll see you at the lesson. Bye.